Now, most important is our speaker tonight is Jay Nearnberg. Okay, he's basically the Director of Global Supply Planning Center of Excellence for Novartis Consumer Health. So the topic, as you can see up here, is CPFR. So an acronym, but we're going to learn a lot about that. I know, speaking for the company I work for and Bruce as well, we do a lot with CPFR at Mars, and I'm definitely interested in hearing more about it. It seemed like we are, just to give it a quick sidebar, for Mars, it seemed like we kind of were stabilized with CPFR, but now we're expanding. So I'm definitely very interested to hear more about what Jay has to offer. So I'm going to read some stuff here, bear with me. But if you didn't know, it says it right here. CPFR is Collaborative Planning, Forecasting, and Replenishment. That's what we're going to learn about tonight. A few things. Jay Nearnberg led a small team from Warner-Lampert representing a strategic supplier to Wal Mart in a quest to create the world's best supply chain. Jay's going to walk the audience through what CPFR is, how it's matured over time, and what else do we have here? What Walmart wanted from its suppliers, how systems evolved, and how a win-win solution emerged from the collaboration. He's going to talk about potential areas of collaboration between any manufacturer and a retail customer that remain relevant today, and how a supply chain partnership can be leveraged for profitability improvement. Obviously, we look forward to hearing more about what Jay has to offer. 3 things that we're going to learn tonight. How CPFR evolved. There's a 9-step process. The 3rd thing is how Warner-Lampert became customer-focused. 3 takeaways: what CPFR is, why do it, and what collaboration areas you can work on with your customers. So without any further ado, Jay.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this subject. I really got involved in this about 18 years ago, and I really haven't thought about it for a long time because now in my role I'm very internally focused. So this represented a very interesting time really to think about the supply chain and have the customer driving change from outside to inside, because it really did drive the change that we saw. So just in terms of understanding, your background and your areas, how many of you work with retailers and wholesalers, just so I have a feel for that? Okay, all right. So some of you. So hopefully, at least, while I'm going to talk a lot about the work we did with Walmart and Kmart and some of the other partners, hopefully it would still apply to more of your customers as well. So we'll do that. But this was really a fabulous time in my career. So as Rob mentioned, I'd like to take you through what it is, or at least what we saw it to be, so you have a sense of it. I got some questions even before dinner. What does this all mean? How is it different? And then I want to talk a little bit about how we started. We were very fortunate to get involved in this. We kind of tripped into it, if you will, and earned the right to play. I want to tell you about Walmart's request, how they approached this, how this whole thing of collaboration came about, because it's kind of interesting. And then how we kind of moved it forward, how it evolved in the industry and so forth. For me, what I'd like to understand, for those of you who do work with the retailers today, so I would be interested, Rob and Bruce, where does it stand today? Your comment just before about it expanding is exciting to me. I'd like to learn more about that. Where do you think it is now? Because we had a vision, we put it out there, the technology has slowly evolved, but really hasn't moved to the degree that we thought it would. But anyway, we'll talk a little bit about, at least from my point of view, why did this come about? A lot of it had to do with the systems and the processes and the people that we found opportunities with. And we'll talk about what we collaborated on, because this is the essence of forming a partnership. And yes, it's funny, I think about working closely with our partners, and I think about what happened the last couple of weeks with our government, and there's probably some real basics, because at one point we did have people who facilitated sessions about how to collaborate and how to work together. And I did facilitate sessions in terms of joint goal setting between the retailer and ourselves, which I think is a great practice. But you've got to figure out, what do you have in common, what do you want to move forward, and then how do you get that done. And I'll also talk a little bit about how we leveraged it. That may be helpful, because I think what we did was we leveraged supply chain to basically grow the business and improve the overall working relationship. So I'll give some examples of that were good, and how we kind of rolled it out and sort of marketed it. So hopefully that will resonate with you. I just need you to keep me honest on time, because I can go on. So let me first talk about what CPFR is. And later on, I'll just take you through some material that we did present to customers, from my company, from the company that doesn't exist anymore, so I'm not violating anything there. But the thing was that when we visited our customers, one of the things we talked about, what's our vision? And what, usually vision statements, kind of crazy. But I actually sat with my whole department, and we came up with this, and I'm very proud of it, because we said, how can we state this, for an elevator talk, and really talk about what are we trying to accomplish here? And I felt really good about the fact that, we said, look, we want mutual profitable volume growth, through flawless continual product flow to our customers. That's it. Keep it simple and figure out how you do that. And that led us, this mission statement, why it's special to me is, we focused, for the longest time, we focused in on our own systems, our own forecasting. But this mission statement, what we figured out we needed to do was become expert in the customer's buying and replenishment systems. So we kind of stepped out of the box, and that's how I grew my department to basically become more knowledgeable about, Kmart, Walmart system than those employees were about how they use their system to generate orders. Again, the mission, improve the partnership between trading partners through collaborative processes and shared information. This may, again, I apologize for the slides. This is when you could convert. I think this is the first time I could convert some old PowerPoints into the current version. Some of the stuff I had pre-2000 cannot be converted or couldn't be converted. But this was kind of the easy way to say, this is kind of the statement of the forecasting and replenishment process, if you will, from the way we saw it. Current state, if you will. If you look at it very simply, the retailer is doing their thing, the manufacturer is doing their thing, and then there's a situation that may occur, and bingo, what do you do if the manufacturer is not able to meet the retailer's purchase order? So, if you look at it from the retailer's point of view, they may look at store planning, item planning by stores, they're looking at the POS data, they're creating a forecast in their system, an event calendar, promotions, store openings, all of that, and they create purchase orders. Meanwhile, for those of you who use S&OP processes, you've got marketing programs, you've got promotions, you've got pricing, you've got all the drivers of volume here, promotions, advertising, all that kind of thing. And then, you have, production planners that are validating the forecast drives production, but again, you have this kind of, issue if you can't deliver it, if you don't have the capacity, bingo, then you have a big problem and you have to figure out, discuss other options. The way we looked at it a little differently was, well, ideally you do joint business planning. You really get up front, you get your processes up front. That's the P in the CPFR. But, the retailer manufacturer exchange forecasts and maintain a joint event calendar. It's not rocket science. So you do that up front. And then as you go along in the year, in the quarter, you're trying to understand is, if you're getting exceptions, is it within tolerance, yes or no? And then you talk about, an order forecast, and I'll go into that. Who generates the forecast, the order, if you will? Is that going to be the manufacturer? Is that going to be the retailer? And then you go through the MRP system. But if it's not within tolerance, then you go back and collaborate periodically you may have a phone call. I used to have 15-minute or 20-minute phone calls on big exceptions. Why is my forecast so much higher than yours? What do you know that I don't know? That kind of thing. So you try to get at where are the discrepancies and get right down to that, and then you may need to adjust your item forecast. So it's kind of a cycle that begins up front, and you're doing it together, and then just trying to monitor through time. Are you within tolerance and not, and where do you need to communicate and sort of right size and use your GPS to get back on track. This was, as we matured and got involved and eventually got supported by VIX, it's mainly driven by, VIX, for those of you, I don't know if any of you are members, it used to be, and I can't say that I know now, but it used to be mainly driven by the mass retailers, Target, Wal Mart, etc. But their definition, their business process for value chain partners to coordinate plans in order to reduce the variance between supply and demand. So yet another definition of it. But really, some principles. Trading partners, manage the process. They commit to the shared forecast, and what we used to say are 2 heads are better than 1. So that's the way we used to do that. So what do we mean by that? Well, we used to basically compare the forecast. What do I say about the business versus what they say in their buying system? Where are the big differences? Longer term, we said, who's better at forecasting? And whoever's better at forecasting should be the one to do it. So that was really where eventually we got the permission, if you will, from some of the retailers to do the forecasting, because they realized maybe a few SKUs that somebody is watching can be handled and managed better than, 10,000 SKUs per person watching it in the buying systems that they have. So, the key thing there is if you have a buying system that's not exception oriented, how do you keep on top of 10,000 or more item, SKU location combinations and watching where the in-stock is. So that's really one of the things. Another part of this process that we learn early on were, number one, communicate your problems or potential problems early. So what does that mean? Well, when we had product supply problems, even when we were collaborating closely with them, we would come to them and say, look, we can't deliver the Listerine in the quantities that we need. So then we would say to them, well, how about if we just deliver to your A stores and not your B and C stores? I said, fine, excellent solution. So, and then later on, as we got more sophisticated, we could say, these are the stores that index high in our product, these are the stores that you go to. So it was really about, you're going to have problems in your supply chain, but how do you manage them proactively so that they're not screaming at you when you come in the door, and that you have a solution or you're working on a solution so it doesn't just blow them out of the water. So the other one was, the other takeaway as we developed the process with Walmart was we understood the importance of being a global supply chain provider, because I think I learned, I said, wow, these guys are going to go international. And before that time, there weren't many retailers, if any at all, that were really thinking internationally. And I got the message pretty strongly when I worked with them that, number one, at some point in time, they may want to source from us in one place and try to distribute it. I mean, that's one scenario. It's a little scary for us. But the other is they're going to expand, they're going to grow, which of course they did, internationally, and acquire other retailers. And so we knew that if we didn't supply well in our own home country, they could hurt us elsewhere. And that did happen. We understood that that was a risk, and then later on, I had a situation with Sam's in Mexico, and they said our performance was really poor at that time, and that if it remained poor, they were going to, hurt us in other countries actually, and not support our new product introductions and our promotions. So I became aware that, gee, you have to, goal that you both want to have. It's very simple. And when I did goal setting, this was the heart of it. You both focused on these things. However, one of the challenges here, let me just see if I can get this. Well, let me go back here. You have different information. As a manufacturer, you know the promotions you're doing, you know your new product introductions, you know the constraints you have. You know sometimes what competitive retailers are doing, and you know the product seasonal profiles if you have seasonal businesses. The retailer has information. It's different. They have store promotions. At the time we were working on this, Walmart was, opening up stores. Some retailers now are closing stores, so you have to look at the other end of it. But they're changing their distribution profiles. There's competitor manufacturing activity. And, they've got inventory status and they know what their policies are. So, what you're really trying to do is, you know that you have different information. How do you get to that? And you need to look at the systems, the organizational culture, and the processes that prohibit the sharing of this information. But that's kind of how we looked at it. By the way, if you want to ask questions, it's fine, because like I said, this was fun to recreate this, because I haven't thought about this in about 18 years or so. Another reason, too, to think about, the famous bullwhip effect. And so, a famous story, a story that comes to mind about this was, I remember sitting in an S&OP meeting, and the brand managers are just saying, look at our sales, they're just, our shipments are phenomenal, they're growing great. And, they would see the blip in the shipments. And the reason was, in collaborating with Walmart, they said, they were opening up 3 new distribution centers. It's nothing more than a pipeline fill. So I didn't, it wasn't popular to kind of take the wind out of the brand manager's sails, but I wanted them to understand that it wasn't because of the latest and greatest advertising campaign or promotional program, but you really do have to understand what's going on in the customer's network and what's driving, whether it's shipments without POS. But, you have to watch the big 3. You have to watch the consumption, you have to watch the trade inventory, and you have to watch the resulting orders, and just make sure they're all in balance and not being whipped around, unnecessarily. So again, that's another collaboration effect, because you don't want to fill them up with inventory they don't need. In terms of the value summary, again, why do this? Depending on what your starting point is, and this was validated through a number of pilots, inventory reduction was one thing we saw. We saw sales increases through in-stock improvement. There was margin improvement. We were able to collaborate on the transportation, logistics, and warehousing, and then we were able also to reduce, the markdowns and chargebacks with that. So, when you improve the forecast accuracy, as most of you know, you can get inventory reductions, you can get the sales increase to the in-stock position, and then, the reduced costs and improve margin, and of course, reduce returns. The intangibles were the trading partnerships that we had. And basically, this is where we were able to, through reducing the inventory and getting benefits like this, really help our marketing group come in and really get their programs off the ground. Yes,
Okay, on the last slide, not in dollars, but can you give us an idea of percentage overall, money that was saved, dollars that was saved?
Well, when we did our pilot, I do have it further on in here. When we did our pilot where we focused in on it, the case study that we have was Listerine. And so it is further back in here, but we show the sales growth. It was worth about 10 million to them, just by a little bit of extra focus. And the way I think the biggest benefit of that was when we had raw material price increases, they brought me in. I basically said, this is what it was worth to you to have us focus on the supply chain. Now we need your help because we need to raise prices. And at that time, they didn't allow price increases for anybody. They absolutely shut it down. But by having, by showing how much inventory we reduced for them and how much we grew their sales, by saying, look, and here's why how our costs for raw materials have increased, they said, okay, you're good to go. You can raise your prices now. But that was really just trading off, those benefits to get more of a business support. Okay. Oh, let me go forward here. Sorry. So how we started. So I got involved. I was, this was back in the 90s, and I was partnering with them on the development of their tool called Retailing. So for those of you who are used to, who are familiar with it, if you read the Wal Mart story, the suppliers basically funded Wal Mart, the Walton family right at the beginning. And so when you log into Retailing, the first thing you see as a supplier is share as much data. It shows a picture of the founder of Walmart, and the picture, at least it used to anyway, maybe it doesn't anymore, but it says share as much data you can with your supplier base and they will care about your business. So that was really, a means for me when they were starting out to work with them. And so, I said, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could see our invoice information? Wouldn't it be great if we could see our forecast information? By the way, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could see store characteristics? Stores in college towns, stores in low-income areas. Basically understand store characteristics size-wise and all of that. So they said, sure, why not? And that was really where we started to give them feedback. Oh, this is really good. Your supplier base will enjoy seeing this. When we asked them for forecasts, I think at first they balked, but I said to them, if you want to be able to see how your business is going, I think would be helpful. So the input, we had a good exchange. The input was well received, and we were a contributor to the Retailing user group. Basically, what they wanted was they wanted their customers to tailor the assortment of merchandise specific to stores. So I'll give you an example. We used to make this product Effordent to clean dentures, okay? So as you might expect, and especially we knew that sales really peaked at the beginning of the month when the Social Security checks would come in. So, and we knew in the heavy retirement areas, Florida, Arizona. I mean, we basically did special promotions and displays in those areas and ran it like a little test lab. And we said, for these kinds of customers, I don't even know if the product still exists anymore, but for these types of customers, these are the kinds of things you can do. And so after a while, I started to ask every supplier, please give us a story about how we should promote your products and which stores, we should promote them in. So that's where some of the stuff started to go. They figured, oh, you guys get it. So then what happened was, I was at a meeting, and some of the leadership of Walmart, had a dialogue that went like this. They said, you know what, we're going to be growing exponentially. And we need to know that you can supply us. So the next comment was the one that just blew me away. They said, we want access to your production plans. I went like, you gotta be, you know, he said, you can't, you know, that makes no sense. I said, you don't want that. You absolutely don't want that, because there's no way for you, if you accessed our production plans, to know what portion of that, you know, plan is yours. You would be totally overloaded. You absolutely don't want that. So that was really the basis to start the discussion about, well, if we understand what the forecast is, and we see it from you, and we can see whether we can supply it or not, we come back and dialogue about it, that's probably a better place to be. So that's kind of how this really, you know, kind of got off the ground. So a big company was asked first, I won't mention who it is. They didn't answer quickly, and because we had worked on the retail link application, they said, do you want to work with us on a new supply chain, you know, endeavor? Sorry, I'll never forget this. It was, you know, we go through this whole process of the operating plan, which is an excruciating process. Many of you go through every year. It's like pulling, it's worse than going to the dentist. And I'll never forget this. We got invited to work with, you know, at the time our largest customer, and we had just put the plan to bed. So it was all being presented to senior leadership. Everything was done. And I go, and at a break, I'm there and under a tree during these presentations, I said, I need another $80,000 to participate in this group. And I think he wanted to just take me out and shoot me. And he said, well, what are we going to get out of this? And I said, I can't tell you what it's going to be. I can't sit here and tell you that I know exactly what the output is, other than we're going to learn about our largest customer, and I don't see any downside to that. So he said, look, you did okay in this stuff, so I trust you. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just about trust, right? So, so he gave the $80,000 and started that, started that process. So the request was really demonstrate that you can grow with us. So they were at the point where they were unsure that their supplier base could grow. And they, you know, as I mentioned, give us your data. No, you don't want our data. And how do you want, you know, the real question is, how do you want to interact with your largest suppliers that drive it? Yeah.
And when they asked you for your data, do you think they were trying to figure out if you were also making something for a competitor?
No, I think they were honestly just knowing that they were going to like open so many, you know, stores and distribution centers, and had probably seen a strategic plan that, you know, was just going to rocket them.
Yeah, the capacity.
Yeah, and they were basically saying, if you can't support this exponential growth, we don't want you as a supplier. Tell us now, yes or no. And I mean, that was some message to bring back to my leadership too, by the way. They were like totally blown away by this. But, you know, I said, look, we've got to commit now. We need to learn how fast they're growing and where they're growing. And, you know, that was I'm glad you raised that. I remember we were going to close a distribution center. And when we started to partner with them and understand how many stores and DCs they were going to open up, I said, you can't do that. Look at where they're opening up. They were opening up, like they were expanding at the time in California, Oregon, and the Pacific Northwest. That was exactly where we were going to close the DC. I said, no. I said, you can't do, you know, that would be foolish. So, I mean, there's some benefit in that.
Yeah, I ran into a similar issue with the company I work for, and actually Wal Mart did want to know our capacity. They wanted us to commit to their service levels. And what we did, and many times when we were in a pinch, is we unloaded from our warehouses, or we would take it from our DCs and direct ship. We would actually pack tractor trailer loads for them, especially for them, and sometimes at a minute's notice if we had to, just to satisfy their demand. But they were very interested in knowing what our capacity was for products that we were selling.
Yeah, and to this day, I don't think I've ever had any other major customer I've worked with ever even consider asking, for something like that. More of it's been the punitive damages and those type of things. The other thing, and I apologize, I would have brought, I looked in my archives, what we developed, the actual way this whole thing evolved was we built what we call use cases. How do we want to interact? So think about it as a script in a play. So we had various scenarios that we played out. So the one I just talked about, what if we don't have the supply we need? Who do we contact? What's the nature of the discussion? So an example would be, okay, supply A stores meaning largest, square footage or whatever, if we're out of product. But, various situations that we had built. So I actually have the original use cases, it was all on paper. I couldn't find them in my archives, too many home moves. But, at least, I felt bad because I really wanted to show like some of the different use cases so you could understand the sort of dialoguing that we did. But that was the essence of trying to figure out how do we want to do business together. It's basically how do you want to interact with us and under what circumstances.
Another quick question.
Sure.
Jay, when they wanted to open the stuff in the Pacific West and you guys were closing, did you have to give them some type of rationale where your distribution centers made sense, or you had to make some kind of adjustment to make the match where they wanted to be?
Yeah, I mean, this goes into the whole subject of network design because, if you're not looking at your design on a periodic basis and understanding where is your volume, where is it going, how's it going to evolve in the next few years. So either you have to be ready with a lot more transportation or not. But, so just to get behind the ears of your customers strategically, and it wasn't just even their physical network. I mean, we even talked about how their, systems were changing and how we needed to, I would even bring our CIO to their CIO to understand, okay, what's changing? What will change? What kind of data would you make available to us? What should we be watching for? So those were good paradigm breakers too, just to think out of the box a little bit.
I only ask because I know a former company where we worked with Wal Mart, they were concerned that we didn't have enough coverage for the West Coast, so they wanted it just for them. And that wasn't Nevada. They wanted us to open up like a satellite warehouse, I think it was in Nevada. Mm-hmm. We opened up in Nevada. It was just for Walmart, but the volume merit, opening it up.
Yes.
The other issue that I thought I'd mention is we found out on the long term that some of our products were being used as loss leaders, and they ruined our competition. They were ending up holding inventories and stocks because they were being undercut competitively in major markets by Walmart. So we had to do something to not lose that part of the market share while we were trying to increase with Walmart. So you might want to also take a global supply chain look at what your customer's goal is from market saturation so it doesn't spike and hurt your reputation as a company.
Yeah, actually that's a great point. In the case of Listerine, we were a loss leader. It would be advertised constantly, it was priced below cost, and then they would beat us up in a sense, or be critical of the fact that they were losing money with it. And after, helping them with the supply chain side of things, we, and even, again, getting an okay to raise the price, then later on, after demonstrating success on the supply chain side, we brought marketing in and said, well, let's change the paradigm so that you make money and we make money. Because if they're always losing money, they're going to always be beating you up. And the idea is change the paradigm so that they, they don't make money. So I do remember that we introduced at that point, I guess you would call it, it's got a fancy term, affinity marketing. So it's what do people buy, and what does their shopping cart look like when they buy your product. So in the case of Listerine, instead of just looking at price, we said, oh, when people buy Listerine, they also buy, I don't know, toothpaste and, headache and, candy. And therefore, this is why you should keep the price up. So it's kind of a market basket look at it. So it's a different way of justifying that.
What we did was just change the paradigm slightly. We used other product that were not as popular. We bought back from our customers that were struggling with the competition with Walmart. But we did something similar to what JCPenney did. We changed what we brought in the store, whether it was the same type of product. We changed it in a way to make it unique for the other customers that we sold to, yet it's basically the same types of products. And through that, we increased market share, we satisfied Walmart, and we stopped that problem. But it gave us a real lesson to focus in on our customer, because their success should be mutual, but yet we don't want to hurt other possible markets.
Right. And again, I was saying this is about 18 years thinking about this. I apologize if you can't see this, if I'm blocking it. So we had a team. I had a small group from Warner-Lampert, but as we started to mature this and get the use cases and start to go into pilot mode, we also had the benefit of SAP and Manugistics. And it's interesting because I'm not really sure what SAP did, if anything, with this. But we did help Manu develop several products called Collaborate. So I know that they have products. The outcome of this was we did develop some software out of the lab to compare forecasts that was a company called Syncra. There's actually a Harvard business case on that company. It's now owned by Oracle. So it got bought a couple of times and now it's part of the Oracle set. But basically, first we call it, when we first started this to improve and focus in on a couple of products to, high volume products, the initiative was called CPFR. And I also looked for some of my toys back there, because we actually had like these telescopes, and we used to say, yes, you can see far, and we talked about sharing the forecast. We had a little sextant in some of our presentations. I couldn't find any of that. But basically, the benefit of putting this together, and this was a consulting outfit in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It doesn't exist anymore. And we actually piloted using the internet. The thing that we did here was in '95, we used the internet to exchange the forecasts and show the differences, the deltas between them. And then it would send a notification back to both of us if there was something significant. So that would tell us, oh, we have either a good news story or a bad news story about our differences in forecasts. So that was what we did here. And we actually introduced this publicly at Harvard University. And then as it started to get more involved, we got more involved with VIX. We added the planning portion of it. So again, the focus is more on joint business planning, the upfront side of it. The planning piece, and when it's done well, I was really fortunate, even though we came in as a supply chain group with several of the retailers. They would say to us, how much do you want to grow your business by? Do we want to grow our mutual business by? And I remember having my VP of sales there at this particular customer when the senior merchandising VP said that. And later on he said to me, that was the best meeting I've ever been in. Because usually it's more of a knockdown, drag out battle. But if you could sit with your customer and say, yes, I'd like to grow my business 15%, let's figure out how we do that together and monitor that, and that's a great thing. So basically it became more of a protocol or an industry standard, and then we got, vendor of the year after that, so that was real nice. We got to go down to the Saturday meeting and all that kind of stuff. This is just some personal observations. Why do I think this all came about? Well, Inform was Walmart's buying system. It used to be an IBM product, and even in the 90s, it was 1960s technology that was really never enhanced. Inform is also used by Target and a number of other retailers as well. And eventually somebody bought the software and did improve it, and that's called E3, which is now used by the drug firms, you know, CVS, Walgreens. But basically, it was not exception-oriented. So, you know, if you're a retailer with 150,000 items in thousands of stores, there's no exception orientation and no exception management in it. It also wasn't workflow-oriented, so you had to know what steps you needed to take in order to generate an order. The algorithms were poor. Seasonality was especially poor. So if you have a highly seasonal product, it really didn't do very well at all, and so we would constantly advise them. Just, you know, one reason, the way this buying software works is it works on profiles. So I'll give you a case in point. Our business had razors. So think about men's razors and women's razors. Men's razors sell, you know, with the exception of Father's Day and Christmas, pretty level. When you think about women's razors,
Definitely seasonal.
it's definitely seasonal. It takes off about the end of June, goes way up high because of bathing season, and then by September, you know, after Labor Day, it plunges. I mean, that, you know, especially here in the Northeast. Well, most of these retailers would blend those two profiles together and didn't understand why, for women's razors, why did they have tons of inventory they didn't need, and why did they miss the season? And it was because we just said, look, you need to separate these profiles out. They don't make sense to blend them. And so we would just bring, you know, consumption data and show them, you know, how to set up their profiles so that, you know, would order more consistent with the way the seasonality actually went. And then it all came down to this: who's better at forecasting the business? Whoever, you know, you can do comparisons of forecasting using the internet, but, you know, we often said, and in the case, if they said, look, you know, you guys do a better job of it than we do, and whether that was VMI or, you know, vendor managed inventory or whatever it is, you know, that's the discussion we should have for the benefit of the supply chain. Figure out who does it best tools, best people, who's focusing on the products, and then, you know, move it forward. So what do we collaborate on? And I guess this really applies for any of your customers, whether they're a retailer. Well, maybe there's some things specific to a retailer, like you know, the rate of sale or promotions, but certainly, you know, seasonality and what that brings, pricing and the effects that it has, you know, so operational things. What safety stock rules do they use? Do we use? What are the economic order quantities they use? What are the impacts of changes in their business, whether it's store realignments or DCs? And then, you know, what are their system settings, lead times, review times, order strategy? Because the biggest frustration we had, we would tell them this. Sometimes they would change the number of weeks on hand and not give us the notice. So, and so now, I believe with the new system that they've been rolling out over the last few years, they are trying to address that. So, from what we identified in the 90s, they're just now, you know, starting to address and say, look, we need to get, if we're going to change the number of weeks of supply, you know, you could be put out of stock in a heartbeat, and you need some advance notice on that when we change some of these parameters, or else, you know, we're going to disrespect our end consumer. So these are the areas that we felt we needed to dialogue about and come to an understanding. So the Comanage phase, this was a phase in the evolution. This was kind of funny. So, you know, the way I think about collaboration, or at least we thought about collaboration, was low tech to high tech. So the high tech is exchanging forecasts using the internet. That was really pretty funky in 1994, doing that. I thought that was pretty cool. But we didn't really start off that way. The way we started off was I posted a person at Walmart in their buying in the office. And the reason for this was, as I mentioned, the systems weren't that good, and unfortunately, we saw this with other retailers too. Often they would have clerical folks, generating the orders, and they didn't understand the settings in the system. So I made sure that my people were certified in those systems and could actually train the folks. And then at times, when my folks came in, they would just sit, pull up a chair next to them and actually, go through the whole product assortment to make sure that the settings were right. So I posted a person down in Bentonville, and we had some major new product introductions, and we would see that the system would be totally mis-set up for these new product introductions. I remember that we had a Zantac launch, and I don't know, somebody entered in 1 box per store, and here we were going to be, sending out, high volume, high dollar coupons and to get the trial, and it's one, like, somebody messed up and put 1 box per store. So, he saw it from the inside before we saw any of the orders come in, and, changed it all up, and, we got it right. We got it right because somebody was checking the settings, who cared and was watching that product. And the interesting story there was they liked him so much that they tried to hire him, because they said to me, well, he understands the manufacturer, he also understands the retailer. I want him to come to work for us. And so I had this, the strangest thing, that they wanted to hire him away. But anyway, it worked out. He stayed with us and all that. But they saw the value. That was the thing. They were clear, because they didn't want to lose the sales either, especially for these new product launches. So he helped out with the new product launches. He knew how to work in forum. But the strange thing was, I couldn't afford to keep him there. I just couldn't. I didn't have the budget for this. And so I went to them and I said, look, I can't afford to keep him down there and pay for this. Can he have remote access? So they said, why not? So they gave us remote access. And that began this Comanage program where he didn't physically have to be there to generate orders. So I actually took this from this is actually from the Retail Link Users Group. I found this. So you can even tell that the way it's worded is interesting. And so this is actually Walmart's words. Comanage is where Walmart and you, the supplier, join your strengths together to optimize sales with low inventories. Utilizing expertise and knowledge of you, our suppliers, and using the Walmart replenishment system through Retail Link to access our host. So this is what we were doing. And so the supplier generates the purchase orders on their system. Okay. So I had an interesting experience at the time. I remember this was the end of the quarter. It was actually the end of the year. I had my CEO come downstairs because he wanted to understand, what is this collaboration business? What does this mean? So I brought him downstairs into the cube with my analyst. It's green screen, in form, it's IBM, with the green letters and everything. And we said, Mr. DeVink, all you have to do is touch this key and generate an order for $25 million. So he goes and he touches the key, and he, all of a sudden, he sees that an order is being generated. And then he turned around to me and he said, if I keep pushing the button, can I get $100 million and make our quarter with this? But I think he got the, idea that, hey, look, this customer is trusting us and basically giving us the keys to the engine as long as we maintain the inventory at the level we needed to be, and the service level that we needed to be. So basically, okay, Warner-Lambert, you manage this, I need to worry about other things because I trust in them, you've demonstrated you know what you're doing, so you can do this. So it says, so some of the other things, it says the co-managed supplier does most everything that our replenishment analysts do today from their own facility. So that was pretty interesting. And then, here's some of the sell of it. What can it do for your company? But some of this really does resonate. Quick visibility to inventory issues, because you see straight down the supply chain. You see all the inventory by, DC stores. Reduction of inventory levels, minimizing returns, shipping, decrease the lead time and improve the invoice accuracy. Improved internal analysis of forecasts, better plan your production to ship more efficiently, blah, 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 blah. And then this is interesting. Commitment not to place orders for what you have, but buying what is needed for Walmart sales. So they actually did watch suppliers at quarter end not to load them in. And we understand that they were hand slapped for loading. So it's, again, back to trust.
Didn't
But-
that destroy the trust?
Yeah, and I've seen this. I know that it was done, but that it's very interesting the way they phrased it. But it was funny to actually see this from their information. This is probably the most complex slide in here, but back to framework around this and how we thought about it. As we started to decompose forecasting and execution, RMF stands for Retailer Managed Forecast. This is Retailer Managed Replenishment. So we're basically trying to say in the various steps of the supply chain process, who does what? And talk about this a little bit more. So this was some of the early slides that I had to talk about who does what. In blue is the retailer, in yellow is the manufacturer. Vendor managed replenishment, this is where you're forecasting at the DC level, maybe today at the store level, and driving it through your own supply chain. But there can be some various flavors of it. So that gives you a sense of that. And now I think at this point, these are some slides that we had where we basically presented to customers around what our expertise was. So beyond the products themselves, we're basically trying to say, here's some additional services around the products that that we can provide. You saw this in the beginning, but as we would discuss, what is our ability, and I apologize, I guess we had some problems here, but when we would visit and roll out with customers, we basically said, look, there's process expertise, technology expertise, and people, and in every situation where we focused on supply chain, we improved inventory turns in each engagement. So, but anyway, that's kind of the offering that we did, and our objective, as we talked about, growing the business in the key areas. We basically offered a menu, in terms of some various options. So I had a group that did vendor managed replenishment. We did some of these other things and either in person or did the forecast collaboration. And then we had various forms of technology that we used and some various software options to get that done in. So again, we're just trying to for each partner, figure out what process do we want to employ with them and who does it better. Back to your question, Gary, this was,
Wow.
This is the pilot that we did where we were exchanging the forecasts and looking at the process. And once we, assisting managing the process worked okay, but as soon as we had the remote access and we could demonstrate, we had, that's where we had the consistency. And so we felt the payoff was there, and that was worth it. And then, this is like weeks on hand, we're able to, notch that down very, to do that. Last topic really, so how did we take this capability and quantify it? So it's kind of a busy looking spreadsheet, but basically when we looked at results, we looked at pretty much an estimation of inventory reduction for the customer, and looking at it from an ideal standpoint, looking at it from median levels. So what were one-time reductions and what are anticipated ongoing savings? So we're basically saying this is the value of what we're doing for you, which becomes the enabler to ask for greater promotional support, greater new product introduction support, better advertising support. I know in one case when I went into a customer, they never paid us on time. They deducted constantly, and they would, our payments would go into the Never Never Land. And we said, we'll do this for you, but in return, you need to collaborate with us about the payment cycle. It's cash to cash. So we were able to take, about $6 million in losses and convert that. So that paid for, my department basically to do that. So it's how you leverage supply chain to get, better results in the business. And again, it varied with each customer. So, again, the benefits, store levels, P&L, utilization, speed to market, advanced notification of supply and demand constraints. So, I guess at this point, but I haven't been close to this. And now my roles have been all internally focused. My latest challenge is just balancing demand and supply and looking at capacity, which has been a challenge. Maybe that's something many of you are facing because of all the, outsourcing and so forth that's going on. But I haven't really been close to this, so I'd be curious, in addition to other questions you have, if anyone that's working more closely with the customers, what you're seeing now. It's a couple of generations old now. Do your customers, want to collaborate this way? Are they backing off? Are they seeing the opportunity for win-win? So that's some of what I'm curious about, for any of you.
Okay, I'll speak for Mars. I kind of said it before. We see the opportunity. We see that there's definitely a win-win for both us and obviously the retailer. So like yourself, drug, we've been working with them for quite a while. But now we're trying to create a process-oriented type of thing so that internally we can learn from the customers that we've been doing it for a while, apply that to maybe new customers that we're about to get on board. Value channel is one that we're talking about possibly bringing on board. So that's the first, expanding also in the club area, right? So we've been working with Sam's. And tied to that too is also the plan. So how do you actually, we have a form, a 30, 60, 90 plan, so a weekly call that we have with the retailers to really talk about the details as to what's going on, promotions, etc. I'm not part of them, but the people that are, so you're really talking to the people that can have an impact on that. It's all about the data, right? So if the data's bad,
yes,
execution's gonna be bad. So that's pretty much a lot of what Mars is doing. Bruce, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, but it's kind of my perspective.
No, I think you pretty much hit on it. So we've seen the benefits when we've gone into customers and started collaborating. So
It's funny because it kind of leveled out and it stayed that way for a while, but now part of it's some changes as far as people that came into the company, but they brought in their viewpoint. So now, like I said, we're going to expand it more and enhance it where we have it already.
interesting.
There's big value.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether the technology, so I know that in Forum now, I mentioned, now it's owned by JDA Manugistics, and I know they did a big project with Wal Mart. And based on the input that we had back in the 90s, they are now open to more manufacturer input on the forecast that they have. At least that's what they presented to me about a year and a half ago. So I don't know if that's actually happening, but it's very interesting for me is they took a number of the recommendations that we made to them back with the VIX committee in the mid-90s, and only now is it coming to fruition in terms of, for example, they still admit on the seasonal products So give an example of flu. What was the flu epidemic we had a couple of years ago? The swine flu, whatever it was. They relied on us to give them the view on where it was hitting and how bad it was. So they still welcome that input, and they just needed to systematize it so that if we are the experts in our product sets, that we could go in and influence them. So they're still open to hearing what we say, as long as we deliver on the inventory turns and the service levels.
Let me just say thank you to Jay and